Good evening, everybody. Hi, I'm Braden Abraham, and welcome to Creative Conversations. Uh, Tonight, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that here in Seattle, we are on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish people, including the Duwamish people, both past and present. We honor with gratitude both the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. Thank you for joining me tonight for Creative Conversations. My guest tonight is one of my favorite directors, Taibi Magar. Taibi is an Egyptian-American director based in New York City, and she directed a wonderful production for us at Seattle Rep of Denai Guerrer's play Familiar just a couple of seasons ago. She works all over the country, including New York City. Some of her recent credits include We Live in Cairo at ART in Boston. In New York, she directed Blue Ridge and The Great Leap, another play that's familiar to all of us here in Seattle. Seattle Rep. She directed The Great Leap at the Atlantic Theater Company off Broadway. She also directed Is God Is at Soho Rep, for which she won an Obie Award in 2018. Master at the Foundry Theater, Underground Railroad Game at Ars Nova. And regionally, she's worked at Woolly Mammoth Theater in Washington, D.C., the Alley Theater in Houston, the Guthrie in Minneapolis, among many others. She's toured her shows internationally at the Hamburg Festival, Edinburgh Festival in Scotland, Melbourne, Soho Theatre in London, and she's received some prestigious fellowships around the country, and she's a graduate of the MFA program at Brown University. Taibi, welcome.
Hello. Yes, thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us tonight.
Pleasure.
So Taibi, you're one of the first directors we've had on this Creative Conversations, and I wanted to talk to you about what it's like to be a theater director in quarantine, besides being out of work.
Yeah, I mean, faithfully unemployed.
Yeah, but you know, there is some work definitely happening, and those of us who direct plays are, of course, thinking about ways we do our work right now. And you know, as theater directors, we really work in 3 dimensions. It's our job to sort of translate what's on that page and the images that come into our head when we read a play or talk about a play, and figure out how to put that in space. And so I'm just curious, like, what you've been thinking about right now, and if there is work that you've been seeing out there in the digital space, because there is work happening.
Yeah.
That, you know, what you've thought about that, what you've seen that you've liked, what's sort of been successful or not, or
I think when the shutdown first happened, I was so anti-digital theater. Like, I got like nauseous to my stomach thinking about it or being asked to do it. I was like, no, like, that's TV, that's Netflix. We can't do it like them. We do something so different. Which I think I was also just wrestling with a lot of grief at so many lost projects. And I think it's slowly sunk in over the past, 5-6 months. And a lot of experimentation and watching a lot of things, really understanding how much can be accomplished. I think the one thing that makes me really excited about theater entering into this form is access. I think I shared with you, Braden, on a phone call recently, a friend who did a show at NYU, and you could count the number of countries that had watched it, and it was like 80 countries or something insane. And you know, theater suffers from so many access challenges, and it's thrilling to see everyone kind of come online in different and new and interesting ways, where people from all over, on different levels of economic levels can access. Yeah, I mean, I'm in the middle of preparing and I'm in editing for one, my first 3 short films, or one's kind of long actually. And I reading all the books about filmmaking, putting myself through graduate school. I have time now, which is nice. I'll say, I'll give a shout out to a particular piece that I really love that I want to recommend, which is called Django in Pain, DJANGO. And it's actually streaming for free on Playco's website. Playco's a wonderful off-Broadway theater company in New York. And what I really learned from that, they have a spectacular visual opening that uses the moving of a light, like a household lamp almost, to create a moving image that's very cinematic. But what I loved about it, what still felt theatrical, is it still had this DIY effect. It was not CGI. It was not layered through color correction or whatnot. And I'm starting to like grasp that as theater's way into film.
Yeah, I haven't seen that piece, but I did watch the piece that you recommended, which I believe is the NYU piece, right? The Clouds.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Which I, in a similar way, I really admired the theatricality on the Zoom meeting, and I know they had augmented it with different digital. I don't know. To me, it was like magic, but
yeah.
But I appreciated the depth of the imagination and the way they were using visuals in a sort of theatrical way, but in a very kind of crude medium, which is Zoom.
Yeah.
But they were finding all of the different, all of the different ways and patterns and ways of using the medium fully. And so it's that like expression with restrictions, but finding all the different means of creating theater in that platform. And I appreciated that a lot.
Yeah. Well articulated. The other, and I'll also say, I mean, the people who sort of look down on it and poo-poo it, it's a new arm that we're growing, right? And every piece is trying something new and different, and it feels kind of amazing to be at this moment in theater, like what will be theater history, right? As we start to create and understand how our work can use the new technologies available.
Yeah, it'll be interesting too to see how those lessons learned translate back once we can get on stage, and if there are things that we bring back from this, in terms of projection design or some other hybrid. About, I could see like watching a part before you go into the theater, and then watching something else once you get into the theater in a different form, and all those different modes of storytelling.
Yeah, I'm trying to get live, but I also don't want to go away. I think we're learning a lot here.
What you said about the sort of mourning aspect, I've really gone through that too. And you and I talked a little bit about this, but I find that it catches me in these weird moments where I would be thinking about a project that that we were planning to do. We're still in the first year, right? So it's like you're still going through that time where it's like, oh, now is the time I would be doing this, or now is the time I would be doing that. But even in thinking about planning for the future, it's like, and I sort of dream about this too, it's like that moment when you walk into the theater and everybody's there. It's just, you realize how much a part of you it is.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But the films that you're working on, how did those come about? Are those things that are completely self-generated for you, or are you working with playwrights on that, or screen?
Yeah, working with playwrights, working with musicians. One I can speak freely about is a beautiful piece called The Duat by an incredible playwright named Roger Q. Mason. They are an alumni of the Fire This Time Festival, and which is based in New York, and they do an alumni spotlight every fall. And Katori Hall has been an alumni, and Dominique Morisseau has been an alumni, two of my favorite playwrights. And so they're doing screenings of his short excerpts of his plays, and obviously we had to go online. And when I was asked to do it, I was like, but y'all know I've never done this before, right? And they were like, no, we really want it. We're really excited. And we managed actually to land Wayne Brady as as the actor, which is kind of extraordinary. Like he lives in LA. I'm shooting my first like short, it's like a 10-12 minute piece. We're not done yet, but yeah, it's been really thrilling to learn that kind of language and learn what can be done in quarantine, sitting in my bedroom making my first film, but also making my shot list, which was really fun. I was like, oh, this feels like a kid in a candy store. Like, geez, you can really do so much with that camera, can't you?
Right. In terms of, how you can control it a little bit more. As directors, we're so used to using staging and lighting and design to be able to sort of keep people's eye moving in the direction that we want. But with the camera, it must almost feel like a cheat in some ways when you're first starting out.
It absolutely feels like a cheat. Like thinking about it, I realized like so much of your set design, which is for me is like the biggest part of my process, is like figuring out what the container is that can stay dynamic enough to cover 2 hours worth of time. And when you don't have to worry about that with a camera, you can go anywhere, you can do anything.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your process because you direct such a variety of shows. I mean, you direct musicals, new plays, premieres with playwrights, Shakespeare, all, and then generative pieces too, that devised work. So can you talk a little bit about your research and preparation process, how you begin rehearsals? I mean, do you approach every project differently or the same way, or is it a little bit of both? Or
It definitely depends on the piece and like where it is in its writing. Some pieces I'm there from the initial idea and taking it through the writing process, and really I'm inside the ground floor. And some I meet, when it's nearly ready for production. Regardless, I do a pretty lengthy script analysis, which I learned. I've sort of put together. I am an amalgamation of a lot of script analysis I had met previously. And, it's hard in the freelance directing world to carve out that kind of time. But I find when I'm able to do it, my work is so much better. It's just like a very methodical way to really get inside and underneath the words and inside the dramatic action. And once I do that, then my imagination can be free. I need to really know it before I can have the ideas and the conversation around approaching it. And then then it's all in hiring. Directing is a lot in hiring. It's like getting the right designers and the right casting. With We Live in Cairo, the musical was very special because we actually got to go to Egypt. So that one stands out. It's about the Egyptian Revolution in 2011, and so that preparation stands out because I got to go to Egypt. So yeah.
And when you're doing a musical, those collaborators are different because you have the choreographer and you have the music director. When you're doing a musical, is it the same kind of process where a lot of the intense kind of analysis starts with you and then you bring those folks in the second stage, or does that happen are you doing more of that analysis together?
Yeah. I think it's mostly the same, but more whiskey.
Yeah, right.
It's storytelling direction is storytelling direction. I also add music and movement in nearly everything I do. I mean, I consider the last scene of The Great Leap musical, right?
Yeah, right.
So that kind of stuff is the same, but it's just, as you said, just a ton more people, which just makes moving the ship much slower and the communication a little bit harder. But yeah, you have more collaborators, which is great. You have more tools at your disposal, more excitement, and everyone loves music. That is one great thing about doing a musical. People rarely dread going to a musical.
That's true.
They're like, well, at least I get to hear music. I get to hear singing, So that's kind of fun. Those previews are more fun than play previews because no one is like this. Everyone's kind of like ready to enjoy at least a concert. So it's mostly the same. Yeah, it's just a lot more people, and like things that would take 20 minutes in tech for a play take an hour in tech for a musical, because there's just that many more moving parts and that many more people to get on the same page. Yeah.
And in a way, all directing's like this, but I imagine with a musical, I think it's even more so, where your work really becomes about time management. How much time am I going to spend on this? How much time am I going to spend on that? I've got 30 hours left. I've got 20 hours left. I've got 5 hours left. This is my last hour.
Exactly.
What are we going to do?
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's a lot like how it's described to me, what like project management is, honestly, just making sure all the work, that everyone's work is getting done. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. More like a traffic cop sometimes. Yeah.
And yet, I think you are also working really as a generative artist. I mean, so much of our work as directors is interpretive, and it is about kind of getting everybody on the same page and working towards the same vision together. But you're also making work around, that's more, I would say, experimental, at least from the kind of work that we typically do at Seattle Rep. It's not as linear, it's more devised. How do you start the process with those kinds of pieces, and do you seek those out to sort of balance the more language-based plays that you do? And
yeah, I really my favorite things are bouncing from Shakespeare to devise, because I feel like they really feed each other. Shakespeare's structures just will always inspire me and reinvigorate me on what structure can really do for a piece. And then so I take that into devise, and then devised is super organic and takes a long time, and the form reveals itself, right? So, but I also like taking that sort of imaginative, subversive look at form back into Shakespeare. So I like tossing between the two. I think they feed each other well and keep me nimble in my craft. But yeah, I think I love challenging the form for sure. I like breaking it. I like disrupting narrative structures. I think there's a rebellious part of me that's always wants to challenge what theater is and what it can do. And yet that's very exhausting. So I also appreciate the chance to like direct Familiar, which is just like a well-made comedy by a beautiful writer with like really wonderful characters that can just like deliver a laugh. Because as challenging as I like theater to be, it's also serves a real function as entertainment, and that kind of purity and heart that and comedy that Denai's script gave us, it was a real gift too. So I love bouncing all over. Yeah.
The Underground Railroad Game was a piece that you worked on. I mean, you've done that piece several different times, right? You did the initial run at Ars Nova, and how long did that piece take to build and develop?
Yeah, so they were devising it, I think, for 4 or 5 years before I even came on board, actually. Wow. And I came on board first for a production at the Philly Fringe. They're Philadelphia-based artists. And then we did Ars Nova about 6 or 7 months later. And then it launched a world tour, I think 9 months later. So I worked on it probably like from the day I got hired to the launch of the world tour, probably like almost 2 years. Yeah, a year and a half, 2 years. And that was incredible. These artists, Jennifer Kidwell and Scott Shepard, who had been they made it and they're performing it, which is very tricky as a director. Hard to get rewrites out of them when they're on stage,
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, it was, that change in structure of how we were working meant that we were making something kind of groundbreaking. I think that kind of devised the closeness of that relationship between performer and writing allowed them to do so much more. Mm-hmm. It was, it was a bit of a hit, and launched this world tour in Germany and went all over. I didn't get to go with them.
You didn't? Okay, I was going to ask you.
No one knew that it was going to take off, and Hamburg Festival wanted to program it right away, and I was already booked. So my wonderful associate director, Caitlin O'Connell, got to go with me, and I made her bring me back pretzels and for her free trip to Germany. But I went to Germany. I went to Australia. It played apparently incredibly well in Australia at the Malthouse Theatre, who I think actually just marketed it exceptionally well. But I think Australia, so Underground Railroad Game is a story of a Black teacher and a white teacher who are teaching a unit on the Underground Railroad. And they create a game. And this is actually based on a real thing that happened to Scott Shepherd. And so it gets into really sort of large questions about pedagogy and race, and it gets a little crazy, yeah. And so Australia is really deep inside the race conversation, and they're reckoning themselves with as a country. So it played really well there. I guess it didn't play so well in London, as I think it's a little bold. There's like a lot of big sex and nudity in the piece, so I think there was a little bit of pearl clutching from the Brits.
Right. Yeah, that element of surprise, I know that you love as a director. I love too, just like how you flip people's expectations on their head right away. And when you're talking about moving back and forth between the devise work you do in Shakespeare, and I can see how you sort of love getting in there and busting things up, but also honoring it's cool.
Yeah. Well, I was like really bored as a child. And so my parents worked a lot, and my sister was doing her own thing. So I think I crave surprise, and I crave being surprised, and I crave making surprises for others. I also think the element of surprise has to do with imagination, which I think is one of the skills inside of theater, and one of the gifts that theater that offers audiences. And actually, like imagination, there's this great author named John Paul Lederach, who wrote this book called The Moral Imagination, that actually connects the use of imagination to social justice work. So social justice work needs imagination, because you're fighting for something that doesn't actually exist, that you can't actually see. So in that way, he loops in how necessary arts are for social justice, which as soon as I heard that, I was like, yeah, that's it. That's why I do it. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's right. God, that's right on. And it reminds me of just like why we need artists right now. Just that in order to create the new world, the world that we want, we first have to imagine it, and we need artists to lead the way and showing us what that world can be. And so many different perspectives involved in that. So love that.
Yeah.
When did you know that you were a director?
I knew that I was a director when I was 17, which is over 2 decades ago. So I was in high school. I've gone to North Carolina School of the Arts for my senior year in high school. They had a very special program for talented actors. It's like a boarding school, and you study with the conservatory faculty there. And I was in class with my acting teacher, and he pulled me aside and was like, I think you might be a director, because I think I gave too many notes to my film. And I was like, no, how dare you? He was like, just come to my rehearsal tonight. He was directing the conservatory students in Master Harold and the Boys by Athol Fugard. And they were rehearsing the last scene of the play, which is a really heartbreaking scene. I just spent 30 seconds in it, and I watched him give a note, and I was like, oh yes, no, this is exactly what I should be doing for my life. Which was a long, long time ago. Feels like another lifetime. But yeah, that was the first hook. And then I just directed all of my classmates in their audition monologues for colleges. Yeah.
It's like I can relate to that first reaction, because I think when we come up through school, you have this idea of what a director is, and there's like, oh no, I don't fit that mold, and so then when you discover that there's all these different ways to do it and approach it. And everybody, of course, approaches it from where they are and what their own center of gravity is. And it's like it's a revelation. I remember that for me too, just like assisting a few people early on, or just kind of sitting in a rehearsal and just watching someone work, because that's the thing with us, right? You never get to see another director work.
Exactly.
And so when you do for the first time, it's just seems so simple, but it's kind of revelatory.
It absolutely is. I actually kind of miss it. I was on the phone with a director colleague, and I was like, I want to come like watch your rehearsal. Like, I miss that part of like being able to like see what they're doing and how they're working and how they talk to an actor. And this kind of, because I feel like I'm the product of all the directors I've watched. You know, I've taken little parts of each of them and sort of, you know, it's like become who I am. So I sort of miss the stealing.
Yeah. I mean, that's a question that I get from young directors who are just starting out, is partially how you get those early opportunities beyond just observing, but how you get those early opportunities to show what you can do. And, you know, you did some fellowships at OSF and the Public, and went to a very good graduate school program. But what do you say to young directors in terms of, because even if you get those kinds of opportunities, there's no guarantees. No. You still have to fight for every opportunity that you have.
Yeah, it's still a very difficult path. Yeah, and I'd even say I got those fellowships, but they were all very hard won. Like the Public theater one, I think I got because someone dropped out, and I was stage managing at the Public. So I got some early advice that stage managing was good for directors because it's an easy way to get in the room and get paid, because I didn't have a lot of money. And that's something that really separates theater artists, because a lot of these internships, it's changing now, but a lot of internships are unpaid, and I could never afford to do that. So stage management was a way I could get paid a little bit as like a PA. My first job was I was a production assistant on Mother Courage and Her Children, starring Meryl Streep, directed by Steve Wolf. Oh, that was grad school, just watching George. I would just like watch George, and then the second he'd look at me, I'd look away, like pretend I wasn't studying him with every inch and fiber of my being. So stage management was helpful for me, and those fellowships were great, but I never seemed to win them. The OSF one was like a favor, honestly. The most illustrious one there is, Drama League, I applied 4 times and never got. I got called back once. There's not that many. I think it's a really difficult task. I don't think the American theater has really figured out actually how to support early career directors yet. We're expensive to train. We require a lot of resources. An actor, it's like an acting teacher and a chair, and you can really teach a lot with that. But directors really need to step in the shoes and understand every part of who they're going to be talking to. You need to really understand set design, really understand lighting design. But luckily those fellowships are becoming more paid, which is great. And graduate school was amazing for me, and I was really lucky. I got rejected everywhere except for Brown, which I was very lucky. But you really just need the doing. It's like there's no substitute to the actual making, and the talking and the reading is all great, but it's that terrifying moment where you're in the rehearsal room, your actors have just finished their first read, and you have to say something, right? Or you have to do something, or now we're on our feet and you have to make something happen, right? And however much talking and reading you've done, you just have to do that a lot before you figure out your way in.
And did you, did you sort of get to the point where you were putting your own stuff together on your own and like financing it on your own? And, because I know I had those experiences where I'd like build the set and put those props on my credit card, which was stupid, and put the thing in the little theater, all of it. And we all have those kinds of stories. But
I did that precisely once. I was bartending at this theater restaurant named Angus McIndoe, and this really amazing house manager named Jonathan ran the Houseman theaters, which are gone now. I think the new Signature is built over the land they were on, but And he had like a tiny 50-seat theater that he was like, you could do something in this theater for free. And I was like, oh my God, this is my big break. And I tried to do Hamlet Machine by Heiner Mueller, which, why? I don't know. I was a little dark those days. But yeah, I put it together myself, and I actually learned a ton, but I mainly learned that I never want to self-produce ever. Directing is hard enough for me as it is, that the idea of orchestrating all of that other stuff, I'm super grateful now that there's lots of other people to do that for me. But the self-producing is definitely a way to go, and there's a lot of wonderful people who are able to do that. I just happen to be definitely not one of them.
Yeah, and it's hard to sustain, but it definitely teaches you, like you were saying, you kind of, when you're a director, you sort of have to be an expert in everything. Not that you need to have the answer, but you have to at least know what everybody's doing,
Yeah,
know what it takes to do what they do, and be able to speak that language.
yeah,
And that's really only experience that you can get from doing it. Like,
exactly.
you can't learn that necessarily in a book.
Yeah.
So.
And a lot of failure. Like you really just genuinely have to fail a lot in order to really understand what it is. Yeah, which is not fun, It's like, but rewarding also.
Do you remember like your first terrible review?
Oh yeah, absolutely. God, I still think about it. You know what's funny? I remember the review, and I can't remember the name of the play, but some theater company. There was a lot of theater companies. I don't know if it's still this way in New York, but a lot of theater companies from like rich actors or
Yeah.
like young actors with rich parents who could just like foot the bill or whatever. And it was one of those. They're always like, they threw these massive, wonderful parties at bars, and then they produced one show, and then the theater company dissolved. So it was one of those, and I remember I was so upset. I was so angry, but I think he was right a lot, and it actually taught me a lot about art directing. I'll read reviews after opening, like well after, because the good ones you actually can learn a lot about the work.
Yeah, I know. You develop a skin and a way to hear it.
Yeah.
Maybe it takes a little bit to process, but I remember mine too. I think it was part of a festival, and I think the review was like one line, but it was just one like dagger. It was like something like boring and hard to endure, or something like it was just.
Oh.
And but yeah, you learn from it.
Yeah. I remember an actor telling me their first bad review, which I don't think can be topped. And it was like, a review was like, had as much charisma as someone selling hot dogs at a baseball stadium.
Oh.
So specific. Feels amazing.
I know. So you mentioned that some projects that got postponed with COVID and or canceled. And I wanted to ask you about Help, the Claudia Rankin, because were you in rehearsal for that?
We had completed our second preview.
So this was a much anticipated piece that was going to be at the Shed, which for those of you who know or don't know, it's a new venue in New York, really cool venue. And yeah, could you talk a little bit about that piece?
Yeah, so it's a piece by Claudia Rankin, who's this amazing poet, essayist, and playwright. And this is her second play. She won a MacArthur Genius Award a couple of years ago. She teaches at Yale. She's an incredible human being, and this piece was based on some of her work out of a book called Just Us, which is actually out, I think, this week. It's fabulous, timely, and exquisite writing about white privilege. And part of that book had also been made into a New York Times article called, I like the title of the article, I wondered what white men thought about their privilege, so I asked, which is a great title there. So it was essentially, it was a monologue by a Black woman called Narrator, but based on Claudia. And just like in the book and the article, go through conversations with white men, and it's a reckoning with how we talk about race and how we talk about whiteness. So often whiteness gets to be neutral. They, someone with white privilege, you get to be an individual. But she's really sort of wrestling and articulating that whiteness is a race, and it comes with history, and it comes with privilege. And so is this monologue that I think the Shed and Claudia kind of thought was just going to be like a one-person show, but I was like, I think I need 19 white men also, which I think came out of an impulse of like, if we're going to talk about whiteness, like I need to like put them on, I need to see a mass of them in order to understand them as a race. And so they sort of dip in and play all the different people that she talks to. And we had this incredible choreography by Shamel Pitts. Apparently it's still happening. No, it's happening. It's postponed now till next October. But we're trying to find a way to present it in the meantime. It's a fabulous piece. It was, it all shut down on March 12th. It was a very eerie day. You're in the middle of tech, so you're not sleeping, you're not eating. It's my favorite time.
Yeah.
And then, I think the NBA had shut down the night before, and I was like, oh, this is what's really going to go down. But I hadn't really internalized it until Thursday morning and the March 12th. And riding the subway in was just very eerie. It was like, if anyone's been on the subway at like Sunday morning at like 5 a.m., there's like not a lot of people. And I'm going in at rush hour, I'm going in at like 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, this is off. This is bad. This is not going to happen. So we're in rehearsal. You get 5 hours of rehearsal before a preview. So I have my work list, my time management, like I'm packed, and I'm like really thrilled because we're going to premiere like a whole new set of choreography in Act 2. Then the crew is friends with like the crew at Lincoln Center, and the crew at Lincoln Center had just been told they were put on hold. So the crew was like, Lincoln Center's going down, and then Broadway went down, and then then our producers stopped our rehearsal and let us know we had to stop. And it's so crazy to think about now, because even then, these incredible producers, I love the Shed so much. They're like, we're going to try to get back by March 31st. We're trying to do the last week of our run. And I was yeah. Oh my God. And now, we're like looking at like 18 months later. I mean, we even like, there's a bar in the bottom of the Shed. And the producer was like, come down to the bar and put a credit card down. So we're like drinking and talking really close and hugging each other goodbye and like stay safe. And it feels like another lifetime that day. And how little we knew actually about what was going on.
I know we were talking about that in our staff meeting today, about how it's been 6 months now, and just how we could not have fathomed that we would be here 6 months ago, because we all thought, oh yeah, well, it'll be a month or 2 months, or we'll be back in the fall, and here we are still working. Yeah. But I'm sure that project will happen when we can come back, right?
Yeah. They're very committed. And
I love that. I love the image on the website is exactly what you described, which is her in the middle of all these white guys who are completely oblivious, and just kind of, it just evokes the feeling that the feeling that feels right. And also I believe that Claudia is coming to Seattle, or not coming to Seattle, but she's part of the Seattle Arts and Lectures series. And I think there's an opportunity to see her speak coming up soon. So
yeah, definitely. I could try to get to that. I could listen to her speak for forever. Yeah, she's brilliant. Yeah.
Well, Taibi, I want to thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight. Sure. Such a pleasure to hang out with you.
Yeah, love to you in Seattle, and breathe clean air.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to thank all of you out there for joining Taibi and me tonight. Coming together with you, even virtually, is really meaningful for us, and we appreciate you being with us. If you're able, we invite you to consider making a gift to Seattle Rep, so that we can continue to connect to our community, share the work and ideas of leading artists like Taibi from our region and from around the country, and keep putting theater at the heart of public life. So thank you again. Take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you again soon. Good night.
Clear.